Hi, welcome to Over 50 TV. My name is Lou Reyes. I'm your host. You know, before you go in for a job interview, most people are just a little bit nervous. They can be even stressed out. And it seems the more you want that job, the more nervous or stressed you get. Here's a little tip for you, something that I think can alleviate some of the stress anyway. Before you go in for a job interview, write down the questions that you know you're going to hear. Then you write down the answers. Then what you do is you read those answers and you practice them. You practice them till you almost have them completely memorized. That way when you go in for a job interview and you get asked a question, you can automatically answer that question. It comes across smoothly. You know, in my career, I have started two successful publishing companies. One was a business-to-business publication that actually went national. I've also founded or co-founded just about a dozen businesses. I have hired hundreds of people, and I've interviewed probably 10 times that many. So if there's anyone who is qualified, there's anyone who can help you to answer interview questions, anyone that can take you inside the head of the interviewer, I can do that for you. Now, in this video, what I want to do is help you to answer a question that you're invariably going to hear. And that question is, why should I hire you? So I'm going to help you to answer that question here, and that is up next on Over 50 TV. Welcome back to Over 50 TV. My name is Lou Reyes. I'm your host. You know, before the break, I told you that I want to help you to answer the question, why should I hire you? And that is a question that everybody hears, pretty much everybody hears in a job interview. But before we go into the answer to that question, before I help you with that, what I want to do is just talk to you a little bit about the fundamentals, things that you need and should think about before you walk in the door, before you sit down in front of that hiring person. Number one, think about what your goals are. Think about what you want out of that interview. And that's something that we do, and I've done that in sales all my life. I've seen people when they come in for interviews, they think about what they want, and then they come in and they're ready and they're prepared. So think about what your goals are. You know, you want the position. You want to implant in that hiring person's mind that you're the best person for the job. So you want to think about how you're going to do that. The other thing that you want to think about, another fundamental, is think about what the requirements are, what the job entails, what the skills are that are necessary to do the job, what experience is required. You can do that pretty easily by just looking at the help wanted ad. Now let's think about you for a second here. You know, one thing that you've got to understand is that if you are going in for a job interview, they're looking at you in one of two ways. If you come into a job interview and you've got a lot of experience, which I would imagine most of the people that watched Over 50 TV, you come into a job interview, you are a person who has a lot of job experience. You've been at working at positions, you've worked at companies, so you have the experience, you have the skills that are necessary. But think about you. Think about how that hiring manager is going to be looking at you. Because if you come in with a lot of experience, it's a hardcore examination of your skills. They are looking at you to solve a problem. They're looking at you, maybe if it's a sales position, they're looking at you to generate sales. If it's a position where you've got to make sure the costs are kept down, you know, they're looking at you as a person who's going to keep the costs down. Any way you look at it, they're going to look at you as somebody who is going to bring value and somebody who's going to have to hit the ground running. Now, another thing that I know that people do, or hiring managers do, when they look at you, they're looking at you as you're a person who's coming in here, and yeah, you're going to hit the ground running, and yes, you're going to help us to solve a problem and generate revenue or keep the costs on, as I mentioned. But they're looking at you as somebody who's going to fit into the company, someone who is going to fit in well with your coworkers, someone who's going to adapt to the culture, someone who's going to come in and has the drive, the energy, has a sense of purpose, someone who's going to come in there and make them look good. The candidates that really stand out, the candidates that I put at the top of this, the candidates that I've even hired, they answer this question with a strategy that they use, and it's really a pretty simple strategy. Number one is they tell you, they either do it verbally or they also do it with some slides or some printouts. They tell you that, hey, I was at a company and I was working there and they had a problem. And then what they tell you is that they came up with a solution and they tell you about the solution, and then they tell you what the results were. I just want to give you an example of a person who answered this question, a person who I ended up hiring. A person who answered this question very well. And this is a guy that I got to tell you that I was so happy with after I hired him, because boy, this person produced. But here's what they did in the interview. What they did is they told me about a position that they had prior to interviewing with me. And what they did is they were hired to be a sales manager for a company, and that company had sales that for 3 quarters in a row sales were in decline. The company was frustrated with the sales manager that they had, and they decided that that person needed to be replaced. So the guy I was interviewing was telling me, hey, I got hired here. I got hired here because of the sales. The sales weren't where the company needed them to be. So what I did is I had 10 salespeople. That's the numbers of reps or sales reps that were in the company. I had 10 reps. And I sat down with each sales rep and I picked their brain. I wanted to know what they felt, why they felt the company wasn't hitting the sales goals, why the projections weren't being met. I asked them what they thought, how they thought they could fix the problem. And then I also said, let's go out in the field. So he took each salesperson out in the field and he watched them in action. He listened to their sales presentation. So after he did that, after he took the sales reps out, after he picked their brains, he came up, he's told me, he said, I drafted a plan. He said, plan number 1 was I knew I had to let a couple of the sales reps go. Immediately, they weren't going to cut it. Number 2, what he did as part of the solution was he came up with a training program. Something else that he did too was he said that the company had never had goals. Yeah, they had some kind of goals, but they were never held accountable. So he established solid, rock solid goals, and he held people accountable, their feet to the fire. He made sure that they knew they had to hit the goals. He said after 6 months, sales had climbed over 25%. You know, I put this person at the top of my list, and eventually we ended up hiring because he knew how to answer the question, why should I hire you? What he did is he just followed a basic formula, and it's a formula that people know, but not everybody follows. And of course, when you're in an interview, sometimes you're nervous and you really just don't know how to answer that question, which is why I'll go back to the very beginning of the video here and say you need to write down the questions you know you're going to hear and you're going to want to practice it. That's very, very important. So somebody who's coming in and sitting in front of me as a hiring manager, a guy who's hired hundreds of people, I'm looking for the top candidate. I'm looking for somebody who's going to bring value. I'm going to look for someone who's going to fit into my culture, but I'm going to look for somebody who I know can demonstrate results. So what I recommend to you when you're in an interview and you want that job, you put together slides, charts, whatever you feel you need to do. You put that together and you sit down and you explain what you've done. So I've just helped you, I believe, answer the question, why should I hire you? I look forward to sitting down with you again. I've got some other topics that we're certainly going to cover, some things that I'm going to share with you to help you to get the job that you want. This is Lou Reyes with Over 50 TV. Have a great day, everybody.
Yeah.